what viewers keep arguing about, and why neither of them stops it. There are conversations that fade as quickly as they start, fueled by novelty, sustained by hype, then forgotten when attention shifts elsewhere. And then there are arguments that refuse to die. Not because they're loud, but because they're unresolved. The discussion around Freen and Becky belongs to the second kind. It isn't one argument. It's many layered on top of each other, looping endlessly across platforms and time zones. And what makes it even more compelling is this. Neither of them has ever stepped in to stop it. Not directly. Not decisively. Not even subtly. Which leaves viewers asking a different question altogether. Why? What people keep arguing about, and why it never settles. At the center of the debate is something deceptively simple. What exactly is this connection? But that question branches into dozens of others. Is their closeness purely professional, or something that grew beyond it? Are the moments people notice intentional or unconscious? Is the chemistry amplified for the audience, or is the audience simply noticing what's already there? If it's nothing unusual, why does it feel so different? The arguments persist because none of these questions can be answered definitively, and because everyone seems to be watching the same moments and seeing something slightly different. That kind of disagreement doesn't end. It multiplies. The moments that keep reigniting the debate. What fuels the argument isn't grand gestures or dramatic scenes. It's the small, quiet things. A glance that lingers just long enough to be noticed. A pause before answering a question, eyes instinctively turning toward the other. A shared laugh that feels unguarded rather than performative. Comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't rush to fill itself. These moments are subtle enough to be deniable and strong enough to feel intentional. That combination is combustible. Because when something is obvious, people agree. When something is invisible, people move on. But when something sits right in the middle, it invites endless interpretation. Why some viewers feel the need to prove something. For many fans, the argument isn't about gossip. It's about recognition. They see something familiar in the way Freen and Becky interact. A kind of connection that doesn't perform itself. That doesn't announce intention. That doesn't ask to be validated. And because that kind of bond is rarely shown, especially without labels, viewers feel compelled to name it themselves. Not out of entitlement but out of identification. They're not trying to expose a secret. They're trying to make sense of a feeling. Why others feel just as strongly that it means nothing. On the opposite side are viewers who resist interpretation altogether. They argue that a professionalism can look warm. A chemistry can exist without implication. A closeness doesn't require explanation. And they're not wrong either. What frustrates them isn't the bond. It's the insistence that it must mean something more. So the debate becomes less about Freen and Becky and more about worldview. Do we allow closeness to exist without meaning, or do we insist on defining it? Why neither of them steps in to end it? This is where the silence becomes important. Because stopping the argument would be easy. Clear statement. Firm clarification. A boundary drawn in words. But doing that would change everything. It would turn moments into evidence. It would turn behavior into messaging. It would turn something lived into something managed. By staying silent, Freen and Becky allow the connection to remain unowned by the narrative. Silence as a form of control. There's an assumption that silence equals loss of control. In reality, it can be the opposite. By not correcting the conversation, they avoid being pulled into a cycle where every future interaction is weighed against a past statement. No backtracking. No contradiction. No explanation required. They retain the freedom to simply be, without every gesture being measured against a public definition. Why stopping it would invalidate something real? Whether the bond is read as deep friendship, professional alignment, or something else entirely, one thing is clear. It's genuine. And genuine things tend to collapse when forced into rigid explanations. Stopping the argument would imply that the discussion itself is a misunderstanding, that viewers are seeing something that isn't there at all. But dismissing it outright would also dismiss why so many people felt something in the first place. Instead, Freen and Becky do neither. They don't confirm. They don't deny. They let perception exist independently of intention. The uncomfortable truth about why the argument continues. The argument persists because it touches something unresolved in the audience. It challenges how we understand intimacy, how we separate performance from reality, how much access we believe we're entitled to. People aren't just debating Freen and Becky. They're debating whether connection needs permission to exist. When not stopping it becomes the most honest response. Sometimes, the most respectful thing you can do with speculation is not feed it and not fight it. To let it run its course. To let people project, question, agree, disagree. To refuse to reduce something nuanced into a statement built for consumption. By not stopping the argument, Freen and Becky protect the quiet core of whatever their bond is, from being flattened into content. Conclusion. Why the argument is the point, not the problem. What viewers keep arguing about isn't a scandal or a secret. It's ambiguity. And ambiguity is uncomfortable because it resists ownership. Freen and Becky never stop the argument because stopping it would require them to explain something that was never meant to be explained. Only lived. So the debate continues. Not because they want attention. Not because they're encouraging speculation. But because some connections are truer when they remain undefined. And perhaps the real reason the argument never ends is this. Not everything meaningful arrives with answers. Some things stay with us precisely because they don't.